Hello students. We are going to look at a different way to solve percent problems today. We've already looked at solving percents using the 10% method, and we've looked at solving percents using proportions, and today on the next odd page of your notebook I need you to write this title, Solving Percents Using an Equation. Now, when we have a percent, we ultimately form an equation with it, but there's a specific equation dealing with percents that honestly is sometimes easier to use than the proportion. So we're going to look at that. Here are the steps. The first thing you have to do, as always, is identify the given information from the problem and label it. If you don't identify the information, then you're probably going to enter it into the equation incorrectly. So make sure you know what the information is saying from the word problem. The second thing you need to do is plug into the following equation. Here's my equation. The percent written as a decimal times the total equals the detail. If you've noticed, a lot of these problems, we've always had a total of something and we've had a detail about that something. If we multiply the percent in decimal form times the total, we're going to get that percent value as the detail. I'll show you what I mean. Let's look at a couple practice problems. Example 1. Sarah has 60 stuffed animals and 30% are bears. How many stuffed animals are bears? Well, what do I know? I know that there are 60 stuffed animals and that 30%, this tells me two pieces of information, tells me when my total is 100, how many are bears? 30 are bears. So I know 60 stuffed animals, I know the total number of stuffed animals, I know the percent, and I'm looking for the detail. I'm looking for how many are specifically bears. So when we write this in the equation form, I want the percent, 30%. 30%, you've got to change it to its decimal form. So 0.3, and let's plug it into the equation. Percent as a decimal times the total will equal the detail. Percent as the decimal times the total is 60, will equal the detail. Another way to write this is 3/10 times 60 equals x. Put an x there because that's the piece I don't know. I'm not sure what that is. But notice all I have to do here is multiply and I'll get it. 60 times 3/10 is 18. There are 18 bears. If you were to set up a proportion for this problem, which you absolutely can do, you would still get 18 bears. The reason we're showing you another way to look at it is honestly because this is very quick and easy. It's faster than a proportion, but also because on a test, sometimes you might see the equation form. You need to be familiar with both. So if you are comfortable with the proportion and you like the proportion, you can always use that to solve. But you also need to know what the equation looks like. Let's look at one more example. I'm going to cover up what's above so that we don't get confused. And we're going to look at this one last example. Having an issue. Hold on. There we go. Let's look at this one last example. I have Mike used 80% of his free time watching TV and the rest playing video games. If he had 60 minutes of free time, how long did he play video games? Well, let's see what I know. I know that 80% of his free time was TV. So 80% is TV. When I had 100 minutes, 80 minutes were used watching TV. The rest is video games. So when I have 100 minutes, 80 of them are spent watching TV and the rest are spent watching video games. Well, if I used 80 of them up, what's the rest? We'll come back to that. If he had 60 minutes of free time, okay, so he doesn't get 100 minutes, he only gets 60. I want to know how long, how many minutes were video games. So this 80% of TV, that is useful to help me figure out a specific piece of the problem, but I'm not actually looking for how many minutes were used for TV, am I? I'm looking for video games. Well, if 80% were TV, then the rest of the percents, 20%, is used playing video games. So here's what I know. I want video games. I know that my equation is percent times total equals detail. That's what I know. And I know that the detail I'm looking for is how many minutes were video games. I'm looking for video game minutes. My total is the amount of time. Well, he's got 60 minutes. And the percent and the detail always match. They're talking about the same thing. So if 80% of my time is TV and the detail I'm looking for is video games, I don't need to use 80% here. 20% I figured out on my own is video games. That's the percentage I need to use in this space. 20%, remember, written as a decimal. I have to move the decimal twice. I've got 0.2 times 60 equals video game minutes, or X. So let's go ahead and figure out how many video game minutes there were. He played video games for 12 minutes. If you want to double check your work, you can figure out how many minutes were used watching TV and add TV minutes plus video game minutes. Since your total is 60, you should get 60 when you add those up. I want to remind you that if you have a difficult time solving with the equation, you do not have to use the equation to solve. You can use the proportion to solve that we've been doing for the last couple of days. The equation is really going to be very important so that you can recognize it on a multiple choice problem. Remember, it's the percent listed as a decimal times the total equals the detail. And sometimes they're going to ask you to come up with a different percent than what they give you in order to find an equation. Thank you for doing your homework. Have a good evening. We'll see you in class tomorrow.